Welcome back to another in our series of the great chapters in the Bible. Our chapter today is Judges chapter 7, Gideon and the 300. Beginning in verse 1, Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod. And the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. The Lord said to Gideon, The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, My own hand has saved me. Now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. Then 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. And the Lord said to Gideon, The people are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And any one of whom I say to you, This one shall go with you, shall go with you. And any one of whom I say to you, This one shall not go with you, shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, Every one who laps the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, every one who kneels down to drink. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hands to their mouth, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people knelt down to drink water. And the Lord said to Gideon, With the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hand, and let all the others go, every man to his home. So the people took provisions in their hands and their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, but retained the 300 men. And the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. That same night the Lord said to him, Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah, your servant, and you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hand shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. Then he went down with Purah his servant to the outpost of the armed men who were in the camp. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the people of the east lay along the valley like locusts in abundance, and their camel were without number, as the sand that is on the seashore in abundance. When Gideon came, behold, a man was telling a dream to his comrade. And he said, Behold, I dreamed a dream, and behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, and came to the tent and struck it, so that it fell and turned it upside down. And so the tent lay flat. And his comrade answered, This is no other than the sword of Gideon the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp. As soon as Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped. And he returned to the camp of Israel and said, Arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand. And he divided the 300 men, into 3 companies, and put trumpets into their hands of all them, and empty jars, with torches inside the jars. And he said to them, Look at me, and do likewise. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then blow the trumpets also on every side for all the camp, and shout, For the Lord and for Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had just set the watch. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their left hands the torches, and in their right hands the trumpets to blow. And they cried out, A sword for the Lord and for Gideon. Every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. They cried out and fled. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army. And the army fled as far as Beth Shittah towards Zererah, as far as the border of Abel-Meholah, by Tabbath. And the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali, and from Asher, and from Manasseh, and they pursued after Midian. Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country of Ephraim, saying, Come down against the Midianites and capture the waters against them, as far as Beth-barah, and also the Jordan. So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they captured the waters as far as Beth-barah, and also the Jordan. And they captured the 2 princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb they killed at the winepress of Zeb. Then they pursued Midian, and they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. A little over 600 years ago, in 1415, the Battle of Agincourt was fought on St. Crispin's Day in Calais, France. Outnumbered highly by some counts, 5-1, the English troops under Henry V won an overwhelming victory over the French. The battle is told by Shakespeare in his play Henry V, and the speech of the king gave to rally the troops before that fateful day is immortalized on film by Laurence Olivier in the 1947 film, and again by Kenneth Branagh in the 1984 remake of Henry V. Many have spoke of those words written by Shakespeare, who creatively wrote what he imagined that speech to be. Among the words are, "This story shall a good man teach his son, and Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world. But we in it shall be remembered, we few, we happy few, we band of brothers." Many battles have been waged against overwhelming odds and are remembered for the courage of those who fought valiantly. Many such battles are recorded in the pages of the Bible. In our chapter today, we look at one of the most recognizable of those victory against overwhelming odds battles, that of Gideon. Once again, we find another of our leading characters from our great chapters included in Hebrews chapter 11's Hall of Faith, as we read in Hebrews 11, 32 through 34. "And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight." Some perspective of this event is given in chapter 6. Beginning in verse 1 of that chapter, "The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years. This unlikely leader doubts his ability when the angel of the Lord tells him he is to lead Israel. In verses 14 and 15 of Judges 6, "And the Lord turned to him and said, 'Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you?' And he said to him, 'Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least of my father's house.'" Gideon is not easily convinced, and after several signs from the Lord, he finally goes forth with his army. And that's where our chapter begins. Gideon takes a formidable army of 32,000 men and is told there's too many by the Lord. Imagine that you are Gideon and have been told to lead an army against the enemy and find out your army is too big. You'll not likely hear that from a field general to proclaim, "I've got too many men." Over 2/3 of the men return home because they are fearful and trembling. And still, the 10,000 who remain are too many. What happens next is not a technique you'll find in Lao Tzu's The Art of War or Rommel's War Strategies or any other commander's strategies for that matter. Basing your military strength on how one drinks from water source just doesn't seem like a good plan, at least from the human perspective. But isn't that the point of faith? After all, Gideon is not lauded for his military prowess in Hebrews, but for his faith. The Lord points out earlier in the chapter, in Judges chapter 7 and verse 2, the Lord said to Gideon, "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel boast over me, saying, 'My own hand has saved me.'" Regardless of how you come to the conclusion of why the Lord chose those who lapped water by putting their hand to their mouth, the victory was not by strength, but by trusting in the Lord. It may be that most of us are like Gideon, skeptical of the Lord's ability to bring a victory about. Go back and count the number of times that Gideon needs a sign to know whether or not this is going to work. Now, even the night of the battle, Gideon is afraid. He needs one more sign to convince him. In verses 9 through 11 we read, That same night the Lord said to him, "Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down, go to the camp with Parah, your servant, and you shall hear what they say. And afterward your hands shall be strengthened to go down against the camp." Then he went down with Parah, his servant, to the outpost of the armed men who were in the camp. Notice Gideon needs to go down. To me, perhaps the most amazing part, and there's many amazing aspects of this account, is what those 300 that neither shot an arrow, drew a sword, or slung a stone in the initial fighting. In verses 20 through 21 we read, "Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their left hands the torches, and in their right hands the trumpets to blow. And they cried out, 'A sword for the Lord and Gideon.' Every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. They cried out and fled." Come to think of it, I can recall another such command to simply stand, and the victory is ours. For Paul said in Ephesians chapter 6 and verses 10 through 11, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil." That overwhelming army that we must stand against is encamped around us constantly. In verses 12 and 13 of Ephesians 6 we read, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers in heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm." That's our strategy? Stand firm? Well, that's what James tells us in James chapter 4 and verse 7. "Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." Sounds a lot like what Gideon and his army did. They submitted to God and stood while the army fled. Does standing your ground sound like a winning strategy today? Well, my band of brothers and sisters, let's try it and see. And Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and look at another of the great chapters of the Bible.